He claimed the ranch everyone feared. Then a wealthy cattleman's daughter brought him a warning. The first thing Owen Mercer found inside the abandoned ranch house was not a broken chair, a rat's nest, or a dead man's coat. It was a child's red ribbon, folded carefully beneath a loose floorboard. He stood in the dim kitchen with dust on his boots and the evening wind breathing through a cracked window. The ribbon was faded at the edges, but someone had tied it into a neat bow before hiding it. Beneath it lay a small piece of paper. Owen lifted the note and read the 4 words written in shaky pencil. "Do not trust Bell." Outside, his horse shifted near the porch rail. Owen read the warning again. Then hoofbeats came down the road. He slipped the note into his shirt pocket and stepped onto the porch just as a young woman rode through the broken gate. Wyoming Territory, 1889. The ranch behind Owen had once been called Cottonwood Hollow. 10 years earlier, it had raised nearly 300 cattle and employed 12 men. Then a fever swept through the herd, a spring flood tore out the lower fences, and the owner vanished before anyone could collect what he owed. After that, people said the place was cursed. Owen did not believe in curses. He believed in unpaid labor, bad weather, weak fences, and men who made careless choices. At 34, he had spent most of his life working land that belonged to someone else. He had ridden cattle through snow, slept beneath wagons during storms, and eaten more cold beans than warm meals. Every dollar he had saved was wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of his saddlebag. $286. It had taken him 14 years to earn it. The county sold Cottonwood Hollow to him for $275. That left $11, 1 horse, a bent shovel, a rifle he hoped never to use, and more work than one man could finish before winter. Still, when Owen first saw the long valley with the cottonwood trees bending over the creek, he felt something settle inside him. The land had been forgotten. He knew what that felt like. The woman approaching the porch rode a tall chestnut mare with a polished saddle and silver-trimmed reins. Her dark green riding coat was clean despite the dusty road. She sat straight, but there was tension in her shoulders. She stopped 10 feet from him. "You are Owen Mercer." Her voice was calm, though her gloved hand held the reins too tightly. "That depends who is asking." "Clara Bell." The name in his pocket suddenly felt heavier. She looked to be 23 or 24. Her brown hair was pinned beneath a small black hat, though several strands had come loose near her cheek. Her eyes moved from Owen to the leaning barn, then to the collapsed well cover and the miles of broken fence beyond it. "My father owns Bell Crossing Ranch," she said. "The northern boundary touches yours." Owen nodded slowly. Everyone in Red Bluff County knew Silas Bell. His cattle wore the largest brand in the territory, and his men occupied the best tables in town without asking. Clara reached into a leather satchel tied behind her saddle. "My father asked me to bring you this." She held out an envelope. Owen did not step forward. "What is it?" "An offer." "For what?" "For Cottonwood Hollow." A dry wind moved across the yard. The loose barn door knocked once against its frame. Owen looked at the envelope, then at Clara. "I bought the place yesterday." "I know." "That was quick." "My father keeps informed." Owen almost smiled, but there was nothing friendly in the thought. "How much?" $600. For one brief second, the number struck him harder than he expected. $600 would give him a clean beginning somewhere else. A sound cabin, good tools, perhaps 20 head of cattle instead of empty fields, and a roof that might fall during the first heavy snow. It was more money than he had ever held. Clara watched him carefully. "My father believes the property will become a burden," she said. "He would rather pay you fairly now than watch you lose everything by December." "Fairly?" "He is offering more than twice what you paid." Owen stepped down from the porch. Dust rose around his boots. "Why does your father want land everyone else refused to touch?" Something changed in Clara's face. It lasted only a moment, but he saw it. Fear. She lowered the envelope slightly. He wants the creek access. There are easier ways to reach water. Not during a dry year. Owen glanced toward the north ridge. Bell Crossing lay beyond it, hidden from view. He thought of the ribbon beneath the floorboard. Do not trust Bell. Clara held the envelope out again. You should take it. This time her voice was softer. Not commanding. Warning. Owen studied her. Is that your father's advice, Miss Bell? Her mare moved beneath her, restless. Clara looked toward the house, then back at him. My father does not give advice. The wind lifted the edge of her coat. For the first time, Owen noticed mud dried along the mare's legs, as if Clara had ridden through the shallow creek instead of using the main road. She had not wanted anyone to see her come. Owen folded his arms. Tell Mr. Bell the ranch is not for sale. Her eyes hardened, though not with anger. You have not seen the lower pasture after rain. I willed. You have not tested the well. I willed. You do not know why the last owner left. Owen's gaze stayed on hers. Do you? Clara went still. The silence between them seemed to stretch across the whole empty yard. Then she looked at the broken kitchen window. You should not sleep in that house tonight. Owen felt the note against his chest. Why not? She turned her mare toward the gate. Because someone else still believes this ranch belongs to him. Before Owen could stop her, Clara rode away, her horse carrying her fast across the fading light. He watched until she disappeared beyond the cottonwoods. Only then did he return to the kitchen. The loose floorboard remained open. But the red ribbon was gone. And from somewhere beneath the house came the slow scrape of a boot moving through the darkness. Owen did not move toward the sound. He stood in the kitchen with one hand near the revolver at his belt and listened. The scrape came again beneath the floor, followed by a faint thump against the foundation. The house had no cellar that he knew of, but abandoned places often carried secrets no county deed bothered to mention. He lifted the lantern from the table. Come out slowly, he called. The sound stopped. For several seconds, only the wind answered him. It moved through the cracked glass and made the lantern flame lean sideways. Then a voice rose from beneath the floor. Put the gun away. It was an old man's voice, rough and breathless. Owen kept his hand where it was. You first. A narrow panel beside the stove shifted inward. Dust spilled across the floor as a man crawled through an opening Owen had mistaken for part of the wall. He was thin, perhaps 65, with a gray beard and a coat too large for his shoulders. One leg dragged behind him as he pulled himself into the room. In his fist was the missing red ribbon. Owen raised the lantern. The stranger squinted at the light. You always welcome visitors with a firearm. Only the ones who enter under the house. The old man gave a tired laugh and lowered himself against the wall. Up close, Owen could see blood darkening the cloth around his left calf. You are hurt. I have been worse. That does not answer anything. The man looked at him carefully. You bought this place. Yes. Then you are either brave or foolish. I have been called both. The old man glanced toward the window, as though expecting riders to appear in the yard. My name is Amos Reed. I worked here when it belonged to Nathaniel Cross. The last owner. Amos nodded. Owen looked at the ribbon. Why did you take that? The old man closed his hand around it. It belonged to Nathaniel's little girl. Owen said nothing. Amos's face tightened with an old pain. Her name was Lily. She wore that ribbon every Sunday. After she died, Nathaniel could not bear to see it, but he could not throw it away either. How did she die? Amos looked toward the dark doorway leading to the hall. That is the wrong question. What is the right one? Why did everyone in town agree to lie about it? A horse whinnied outside. Both men froze. Owen lowered the lantern flame and moved to the window. The yard was empty, but his horse stood stiff beside the porch, ears pointed toward the northern ridge. Amos struggled to stand. They found me. Who? Bell's men. Owen turned. Why are they looking for you? Because I know why Silas Bell wants this ranch. Owen stared at him. Before Amos could continue, 3 riders appeared beyond the broken gate. They came slowly, spreading apart as they entered the property. The man in the center wore a pale hat and a long brown coat. Owen recognized him from town. Wade Tolliver, foreman of Bell Crossing Ranch. Owen stepped onto the porch. Amos remained inside, hidden behind the kitchen wall. Tolliver stopped near the water trough. His 2 men stayed mounted behind him. Evening, Mercer. Evening. Tolliver smiled without warmth. Mr. Bell heard you refused his offer. News travels fast. It travels faster when a man makes a poor decision. Owen rested one shoulder against the porch post. Did Mr. Bell send you to improve my judgment? He sent me to look for a thief. What was stolen? A horse and company papers. Owen's expression did not change. Tolliver looked past him toward the house. Old drifter named Amos Reed, limp in his left leg, talks too much. Owen heard a faint movement behind the wall. He has not come through here, Owen said. Tolliver studied him for a long moment. You sure? I would remember a man crawling through my kitchen. One of the riders laughed. Tolliver did not. He dismounted and walked toward the porch. Owen straightened. Tolliver stopped at the bottom step. Mind if we look around? Yes. The smile disappeared from Tolliver's face. This land borders Bell property. We have a missing horse and a dangerous man. Then search your own land. The 2 riders shifted in their saddles. Tolliver glanced at the broken roof, the leaning porch, and the empty fields. You spent everything you had on this place, did you not? Owen said nothing. Men who have nothing should be careful about making enemies. Owen looked directly into his eyes. Men who send 3 riders after an injured old ranch hand should be careful about explaining why. For the first time, Tolliver's calm slipped. Only slightly. But Owen saw it. Tolliver stepped back and put on his gloves. We will return tomorrow with authority. Bring the deed while you are at it. Mine says the house belongs to me. Tolliver mounted. As the riders turned toward the gate, the foreman looked back. Miss Bell should not have come here. The words struck Owen harder than the threat. You follow her. Tolliver's mouth curved. Everyone at Bell Crossing is looked after. The 3 men rode north. Owen waited until the hoofbeats faded before returning to the kitchen. Amos had slid to the floor. His face was pale. Owen knelt and cut away the cloth around the injured leg. The wound was deep but clean, likely caused by a fall against sharp stone. You need a doctor. I need to leave before morning. You will not make it 10 miles. I only need to reach the county judge. Owen found an old basin, poured water into it, and began cleaning the wound. Amos gripped the edge of the table. What papers did you take? Owen asked. The old man looked toward the floorboard where the ribbon had been hidden. Proof that Cottonwood Hollow was never legally Silas Bell's to claim. It is mine now. Not if Bell finds what is buried here first. Owen stopped working. Buried where? Amos reached into his coat and pulled out a small brass key blackened by age. Nathaniel Cross found silver beneath the lower pasture, he whispered. Not enough to build a city, but enough to make a powerful man kill the truth. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Owen rose quickly and turned toward the darkness. Clara Bell stood in the doorway, her hair damp from the night mist and her face filled with fear. She looked at Amos, then at the key in his hand. "You should not have told him," she said. Amos stared at her. "Your father already knows," he answered. Clara closed the door behind her. "No," she said quietly. "My father is not the one you should be afraid of." The lantern flame trembled between them. Owen stood near the table. Amos sat with his wounded leg stretched before him, and Clara remained by the door as though she had stepped into a room where every truth carried a price. Outside, the night wind moved through the cottonwoods. A branch scratched against the roof in slow, uneven strokes. Owen looked at Clara. "Then tell me who I should fear." She did not answer at once. Her eyes went to the brass key in Amos's hand. "Where did you get that?" "From Nathaniel Cross," Amos said, 3 nights before he disappeared. Clara's face lost what little color it had. "My father said Cross left the territory." "Your father says many things." Owen heard anger enter her voice. "Do not speak of him like that." Amos leaned back against the wall. "I worked beside Clara Bell before you were born. I know what sort of man he was, and I know what sort he became." Clara stepped closer. "My father may be proud, but he is not a murderer." "No one said he was." The room went quiet. Owen noticed it immediately. Amos had not accused Clara Bell, not directly. He set the bloodied cloth aside. "You said Bell's men were chasing you." "I said Tolliver's men were chasing me." Clara lowered her gaze. Owen turned toward her. "You knew he was coming here tonight." "I knew he had sent riders after Amos." "And you came to warn me." "I came to make sure they did not find him." Amos gave a bitter laugh. "That kindness arrived before or after you offered Mercer $600 to leave." Clara faced him. "I brought the offer because my father ordered me to." "You could have refused." "Yes," she said, "and Tolliver would have come instead." That silenced Amos. Clara removed her gloves. Her fingers were cold and slightly trembling. "When my father wants something done, he gives an instruction. When Wade Tolliver wants something done, he makes certain nobody asks how it happened." Owen watched her place the gloves on the table. "How long has Tolliver worked for your father?" 8 years. "Does Bell know what kind of man he is?" A shadow passed across her face. "I am no longer certain what my father knows." Amos slowly opened his fist. The brass key rested in his palm. "This opens a strongbox hidden beneath the lower pasture." Clara stared at it. "There is no strongbox." "You were a child when Nathaniel buried it." "I have ridden that pasture 100 times. And never knew what was under it." Owen walked to the window. The northern ridge was dark now, but he could still imagine Tolliver waiting somewhere beyond it. "What is in the box?" Amos glanced toward Clara. "Records, survey maps, letters from a mining assessor, a copy of the original water agreement between Cottonwood Hollow and Bell Crossing." Owen looked back at him. "What water agreement?" "The creek does not belong to Bell Crossing. It never did. Nathaniel granted Cela's seasonal access during dry months, nothing more. Bell has used it for years as though it were his own." Clara shook her head. "That cannot be true. The northern channels feed our entire operation." "That is why your father wants this land." "My father told me it was for the creek." "He wants the deed, because the old agreement can be challenged by the new owner." Owen felt the shape of the danger forming around him. Cottonwood Hollow was not worthless. Its broken house, dry well, and neglected fields had hidden the one thing Bell Crossing could not afford to lose. "Water." Clara moved to the table and looked down at Amos. "Where is the strongbox?" "Lower pasture, near the split cottonwood." "There are 3 split cottonwoods." Nathaniel marked the right one. "With what?" Amos hesitated. Clara leaned closer. "With what?" "A red ribbon." Owen looked toward the open floorboard. The ribbon Amos had removed was not a keepsake alone. It was a marker. Clara closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, something had changed. She no longer looked like the daughter of the richest rancher in the county. She looked like a woman realizing that the home she trusted had been built beside a secret. "My father kept Lily Cross's ribbon," she said quietly. Amos frowned. "What?" "I saw one like it in his study when I was 10. It was locked in the bottom drawer of his desk." The old man gripped the chair. "Then Silas found the marker. Or someone gave it to him." Owen thought of Tolliver. 8 years at Bell Crossing. Long enough to learn every road, every weakness, every hidden account. "Why would Tolliver want the box?" Owen asked. Amos looked toward the door. "Because there is more in it than the water agreement." The wind struck the house harder. Dust fell from a ceiling beam. Amos lowered his voice. "Nathaniel wrote down every payment he made to keep his daughter safe." Clara stared at him. "Safe from whom?" Amos swallowed. "Wade Tolliver's father." Owen waited. Amos looked toward the dark hall, as if the memory itself might be standing there. Gideon Tolliver ran debt collections for half the county. He lent money to desperate ranchers after the bad winters, then took their cattle and land when they could not pay. Nathaniel discovered the contracts were false. "And Lily?" Clara asked. Gideon threatened her to keep Nathaniel silent. Clara pressed one hand against the table. "My father knew. Silas tried to help Nathaniel, at first. Then Lily vanished." The words settled heavily. Owen saw Clara's eyes fill, but she did not look away. "I was told she died from fever." "So was the town," Amos said. "What really happened?" Amos's mouth tightened. "I never found out." The silence that followed felt colder than the night outside. Owen returned to the window and looked toward the lower pasture. He could not see it from the house, only the black outline of trees beyond the field. "If the box is still there, we find it before Tolliver does." Clara shook her head. "Not tonight." "Why?" "Because the creek crossing is watched. By Bell men. By men loyal to Tolliver." Amos looked at her. "There is a difference." "Yes," Clara said, "a dangerous one." She walked to the door and listened. No hoofbeats. No voices. Still, she did not relax. "If Tolliver believes Amos told you about the box, he will return with more than 3 riders." Owen picked up the key and examined it beneath the lantern light. "Then we go before dawn." Clara met his eyes. "You do not understand. If my father discovers me helping you, I may lose everything." Owen's voice softened. "And if you do nothing?" Her gaze moved toward the floorboard where the ribbon had been hidden. For a moment she looked very young. Then she straightened. "If this truth matters to you, stay with the story, because some families are not broken by lies all at once. They are broken one silence at a time." Clara reached for her gloves. "There is another way into the lower pasture," she said. "An old cattle trail along the western bluff. Tolliver does not know I remember it." Owen placed the key inside his coat. "You are coming with us. I am the only one who can lead you there in the dark." Amos tried to stand and nearly collapsed. "You cannot ride," Owen said. "I am not staying here." "You will if moving you gets us caught." A soft click came from outside. Not a branch. Not the barn door. The careful sound of a rifle being cocked. The lantern went dark as a bullet tore through the window and buried itself in the kitchen wall. Clara dropped to the floor before the broken glass finished falling. Owen caught the lantern as it tipped from the table and smothered the flame beneath his coat. The kitchen disappeared into darkness. Another shot struck the wall near the stove. Amos swore under his breath. "Back room," Owen whispered. He grabbed the old man beneath the arm and pulled him toward the hall. Clara moved beside them, one hand against Amos's back to keep him steady. Outside, a horse snorted near the porch. Then came the quiet sound of boots crossing dry ground. Whoever had fired was not alone. Owen guided them into a narrow room at the rear of the house. Moonlight came through a gap in the boards. There was no furniture, only an old iron bed frame and a rusted washstand. "Is there another way out?" Clara whispered. Amos pointed toward the floor. "Trapdoor under the bed." Owen stared at him. "You might have mentioned that sooner." "I was busy bleeding." They lifted the bed frame aside. Beneath it lay a square wooden door with an iron ring. Owen pulled it open. Cold air rose from a black passage below. Clara looked into it. "Where does it lead?" "Old Root Tunnel," Amos said. "Runs beneath the yard and opens near the dry creek bed." A heavy step sounded in the kitchen. Someone pushed through the broken window. Owen helped Amos down first. Clara followed, gathering her coat close so it would not catch on the rough boards. Owen paused before climbing in. Through the open doorway, he saw the faint outline of a man moving through the hall. The stranger carried no lantern. He knew the house. Owen lowered himself into the tunnel and pulled the trapdoor shut above him. The passage was barely high enough to crawl through. Packed earth pressed close on both sides. The air smelled of roots, damp wood, and something older that had been sealed away for years. Amos moved slowly ahead, dragging his injured leg. Behind Owen, footsteps entered the back room. The bed frames scraped across the floor. "They know," Clara breathed. Owen pushed Amos forward. "Keep moving." The trapdoor lifted. A thin blade of moonlight cut into the passage behind them. Owen turned just as a hand reached through. He struck it hard with the grip of his revolver. A man shouted, and the trapdoor slammed down. Owen crawled after Clara. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them onto their elbows. Soil crumbled from the ceiling. Clara's breathing grew sharp, though she never asked to stop. Behind them, the trapdoor opened again. Voices entered the passage. "Mercer." Wade Tolliver's call carried through the earth. "You are turning a business matter into something personal." Owen kept moving. "It became personal when you shot through my window." Tolliver laughed. "You do not even know what you are protecting." Clara looked back at Owen. He could not see her expression clearly, but he heard the fear in her voice. "He knows I am here." Tolliver called again. "Miss Bell, your father is worried." Clara's shoulders stiffened. "My father did not send you," she shouted. There was a pause. Then Tolliver answered in a softer voice. "No, he did not." Owen felt Clara's fear change into certainty. Whatever doubt she had carried about Tolliver was gone. Amos reached a wooden barrier at the end of the passage. He pushed against it, but it did not move. "It is stuck," he said. Owen crawled beside him and placed both hands against the boards. Behind them, someone entered the tunnel. The passage filled with the scrape of knees and elbows. Owen pushed harder. The boards gave suddenly, throwing him forward into the dry creek bed. He turned and pulled Amos through. Clara emerged after him, her coat torn at one shoulder and dirt across her face. The creek bed lay below the western bluff, hidden from the house by a line of brush. Their horses were nowhere near them. They had only moments. "This way," Clara said. She led them along the creek bed toward a stand of cottonwoods. Owen carried Amos when the old man could no longer keep pace. They reached a narrow cut in the bluff, just as voices rose behind them. Clara found a rope hanging from a tree limb and pulled it twice. A horse stepped from behind the rocks. Owen recognized the chestnut mare she had ridden earlier. "You left her here." "I hoped I would not need her." She helped Amos into the saddle. The old man groaned but remained upright. "One horse will not carry all three," Owen said. "It does not have to." Clara pointed through the trees. Two more horses stood tied farther up the trail. Owen looked at her. You planned an escape before entering the house. I grew up around powerful men, she said. Planning a way out becomes a habit. The first rider appeared at the mouth of the creek bed. Owen fired once into the dirt before the man's horse. The animal reared, blocking the riders behind it. Owen did not wait. He mounted the nearest horse and followed Clara onto the western trail. They rode single file beneath the bluff, branches pulling at their coats. Amos leaned low over the chestnut mare, one hand twisted in the mane. The trail rose sharply toward the lower pasture. Clara had been right. Tolliver's men did not know the way. Their voices faded behind them. Dawn was still more than an hour away when they reached a high shelf overlooking Cottonwood Hollow. From there, Owen could see his ranch house below. A pale glow appeared in the kitchen. For one hopeful second, he thought someone had lit a lantern. Then fire climbed through the broken window. Clara stopped beside him. Flames spread along the roof, bright against the black valley. Owen watched 14 years of saving, and one day of ownership begin to burn. He did not speak. Clara looked at him, waiting for anger. Instead, he turned his horse toward the lower pasture. The house can be rebuilt. Her eyes searched his face. What about the strongbox? Owen touched the brass key inside his coat. That is what they are trying to keep us from finding. They rode down into the pasture as smoke rose behind them. Near the creek stood 3 split cottonwoods, their pale trunks shining under the moon. Amos pointed weakly toward the farthest tree. Owen dismounted and searched the bark. At first he saw nothing. Then Clara knelt near the roots and brushed aside a layer of dirt. Pinned beneath a stone was a strip of faded red cloth. They began digging with their hands. Several inches below the surface, Owen's fingers struck iron. Together, he and Clara cleared the soil until the lid of a small strongbox appeared. Owen inserted the key. Before he could turn it, Amos spoke from the saddle. "Do not open it." Owen looked up. The old man was staring beyond them. On the ridge above the pasture stood a lone rider. Even at that distance, Clara recognized the shape of the man. Her voice broke into a whisper. "Father." Cela's bell remained on the ridge without moving. The early light behind him turned horse and rider into one dark shape against the sky. Clara rose slowly from beside the strongbox. "Father." Her voice did not carry far, but the man on the ridge seemed to hear it. He guided his horse down the slope at a steady pace, not hurried, not cautious. It was the way powerful men approached trouble when they believed trouble would wait for them. Owen kept one hand near the brass key. Amos shifted painfully in the saddle. "Do not let him take the box." Silas reached the bottom of the hill and stopped several yards away. He was a large man in his late 50s, broad through the shoulders, with silver beginning at his temples. His coat was buttoned neatly despite the hour. He looked first at Clara's torn sleeve, then at Amos's wounded leg, and finally at Owen's dirt-covered hands resting on the iron lid. Behind them, smoke from the ranch house drifted over the pasture. Silas watched it for a long moment. Was anyone inside? "No," Owen said. Silas nodded once, as though placing the answer in a private account. Then he looked at Clara. "I told you not to return here. You told me to bring him an offer. I did not tell you to involve yourself in this." Clara's chin lifted. "You did not tell me the ranch was hiding evidence." Something tightened in Silas's face. Amos saw it. "So you knew," the old man said. Silas dismounted. "I knew Nathaniel buried something." "That is not the same as knowing what." "You searched for it." "Yes." "For how long?" Silas ignored the question and walked toward the strongbox. Owen stepped between him and the tree. "That is far enough." Silas stopped. The two men stood facing each other, while the creek moved quietly behind them. Silas's eyes went to the soot on Owen's coat and the mud on his knees. "You purchased this land yesterday," he said. "By sunrise today, your house has been burned, armed men have entered your property, and my daughter has been placed in danger. Your foreman did that. You have no proof. The rifle ball in my kitchen wall might help." Silas looked toward the smoke again. "Wade Tolliver was not acting on my orders." Clara stepped closer. Then why was he searching for Amos? Silas did not answer. "Father, I sent Wade to find him and bring him back." Clara stared at him. "You knew Amos was alive." "I learned 3 days ago. And you said nothing to me. This did not concern you." Her voice shook. "Men shot into a house while I was inside. It concerns me now." Silas's expression softened for only a second, but he quickly buried it. He looked at Amos. "What did you take from my office?" "Copies of contracts Gideon Tolliver forged." Silas's jaw tightened. "You had no right to enter my home. I had every right to take back what Nathaniel trusted me to protect." Owen glanced between them. "You both know what is in the box." Silas removed his gloves, one finger at a time. "I know what should be in it." "Then say it." Silas met Owen's eyes. "Records proving that Nathaniel Cross discovered a silver vein beneath this pasture. Payment records tied to Gideon Tolliver. The old water agreement, perhaps letters." "Letters from whom?" Clara asked. Silas looked at her. "Your mother's." The words seemed to empty the air from the valley. Clara's face went still. "My mother knew Nathaniel Cross. She knew his wife." Clara took a step back. Her mother, Evelyn Bell, had died when Clara was 12. In the story Silas told, she had been gentle, practical, and devoted to Bell Crossing. He had never once spoken Nathaniel Cross's name in connection with her. "What letters?" Clara asked. Silas looked older than he had moments before. "Open the box." Owen knelt and turned the brass key. The lock resisted, rust grinding inside it. He pressed harder until the mechanism gave with a sharp click. No one moved. Then Owen lifted the lid. Inside were oilcloth bundles, a small ledger, several folded survey maps, and a silver locket darkened with age. Clara stared at the locket. She knew it before touching it. "My mother wore that." Silas closed his eyes briefly. Clara lifted it with both hands. A thin chain hung broken from one side. "Why was it buried here?" Silas looked toward the creek. "Because Evelyn was here the night Lily Cross disappeared." Amos made a sound low in his throat. "You never told me that." "I told no one." Clara's fingers tightened around the locket. "What happened?" Silas's voice grew quiet. "Your mother came to warn Nathaniel that Gideon Tolliver intended to take Lily as leverage. She arrived too late." "Did Gideon take her?" Silas looked at the iron box. "I believed so." "Believed?" "No body was ever found." Amos leaned forward in the saddle. "Nathaniel said Lily was dead." "Nathaniel was broken and frightened. He said many things that night." Owen picked up the ledger. The first pages contained dates, cattle numbers, and loan payments. Near the middle, the writing changed. The lines became hurried, uneven. One name appeared again and again. Gideon Tolliver. Beside it were amounts of money, threats, and notes about forged land claims. Then Owen reached the final written page. A sentence had been underlined twice. Evelyn took Lily west before dawn. Owen looked up. Silas had gone pale. Clara read the line over his shoulder. "My mother took her." Silas stepped forward and took the ledger from Owen's hands. He read the sentence once. Then again. "That is impossible." Amos stared at him. "Why?" "Because Evelyn returned to Bell Crossing before sunrise. Alone. Clara opened the locket. Inside was a tiny painted portrait of her mother. Behind it, folded into a space barely large enough to hold it, was a narrow strip of paper. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. The writing was faded, but still clear. Clara read aloud. "Silas, forgive me. I could not leave the child with him. I sent her where neither Gideon nor Nathaniel would think to look." No one spoke. A horse called from the ridge. Then another answered. Silas turned sharply. 6 riders appeared above the pasture. Wade Tolliver sat at their center. Even from below, Owen could see that the foreman was smiling. Silas folded the note and placed it inside his coat. "Get Clara out of here." Owen looked at him. "You said Tolliver was not acting for you." "He is not." Silas drew his revolver, but kept it pointed toward the ground. "He stopped being my foreman sometime before sunrise." Clara looked from her father to the riders. "Why are they here?" Silas's gaze stayed fixed on Wade. "Because the box does not only prove what his father did." He looked at Owen. "It proves Wade has been doing the same thing." The riders began moving down the slope. If one hidden truth can change how you see an entire family, stay close to this story, because the name Evelyn Bell wrote on the next letter would wound Clara more deeply than any bullet could. Owen reached back into the strongbox. Beneath the survey maps lay a sealed envelope. Across the front, in Evelyn Bell's handwriting, were the words, "For my daughter, when Silas is finally ready to tell her who she is." The riders came down the slope in a loose line. Wade Tolliver did not hurry them. He let the distance close slowly, as though he wanted every person beside the split cottonwood to understand that the pasture had become a trap. Silas Bell stepped in front of Clara. "Take the western trail," he said to Owen. "It opens near Miller's Ford." Owen kept the sealed letter in one hand and the strongbox key in the other. "And leave you here. This is my quarrel." "No," Clara said. "It became mine when you hid the truth." Silas looked at her, and for the first time since arriving, his authority failed him. He seemed caught between ordering his daughter away and knowing she would no longer obey without an answer. Wade stopped 20 yards from them. His men spread out along the creek. "Mr. Bell," he called, "you have made an unfortunate mistake." Silas drew his revolver fully now, but held it low. "My mistake was trusting you." Wade smiled. "You trusted me because I kept your ranch strong. You kept it afraid. That is often the same thing." Clara flinched at the calmness in his voice. Owen glanced toward the ridge. The western trail was open, but Amos could barely stay in the saddle. They would not outrun 6 riders. Wade's gaze settled on the strongbox. "Hand it over, Mercer. You burned my house for it. Your house was already falling apart. That does not make it yours to burn." Wade shrugged. "You should have taken the $600. Silas looked at him sharply. "You sent Clara with that offer knowing the land was worth more. I encouraged you to solve a problem before it became one. You forged the water records. I corrected them." Amos spat into the grass. "Your father used the same word." For the first time, Wade's expression changed. He turned toward the old man. "You should have stayed forgotten." Amos straightened despite the pain in his leg. "I tried. Conscience has poor manners." Wade lifted one hand. The men beside him brought their rifles forward. Clara moved closer to Owen. He could feel her trembling, though her voice remained steady. "What does the letter say?" Silas looked at her. "This is not the moment." "It may be the only moment." Wade's smile returned. "Go ahead, Miss Bell. Learn what kind of family you belong to." Silas raised his gun. "Do not speak to her." "Why not?" Wade asked. "You never did." The insult landed because it was true. Owen looked down at the envelope. The seal had already cracked with age. He could open it now and give Clara the answer she had been denied, but 6 armed men watched from across the pasture. Then he noticed something beyond the creek. A thin line of cattle moved along the northern rise. Bell cattle. Dozens of them. Behind the herd rode 3 ranch hands. Silas saw them too. His face did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Wade had not noticed. Owen spoke without looking away from him. "Amos, can you stay on that horse?" "For a little while." "Clara, when I say ride, take him toward the creek." "The creek is blocked." "Not for long." Silas glanced at Owen. Something passed between them, not trust exactly, but recognition. Wade's impatience began to show. "The box." Owen knelt slowly. He placed the envelope back inside and closed the lid. Then he stood with the strongbox in both hands. Wade relaxed. "That is sensible." Owen walked forward 3 steps. Silas did not stop him. Clara stared at him in disbelief. "Owen." He kept moving. When he reached the edge of the creek, he lifted the box as if to toss it across. Wade leaned forward in the saddle. Owen threw it sideways into the water. The iron box struck the shallow creek with a heavy splash and disappeared beneath the muddy current. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Wade shouted. 2 riders spurred toward the water. Owen fired into the air. The sharp crack startled the Bell cattle on the northern rise. The herd broke. Dozens of frightened animals rushed downhill toward the creek, driven by the sudden noise and the riders behind them trying desperately to turn them. Wade's men scattered. "Ride," Owen shouted. Clara pulled Amos's horse toward the western bank. Silas mounted in one motion and fired twice into the dirt before the nearest pursuers, forcing them back. Owen ran beside Clara's mare until the ground rose enough for him to catch the saddle of a loose horse, abandoned near the cottonwoods. The cattle poured through the pasture, kicking dust into the dawn. No one was trampled, but Wade's line collapsed beneath the confusion. They reached the western trail just as the herd blocked the creek behind them. Silas rode last. A rifle cracked from the dust. His horse stumbled but kept moving. Clara turned in the saddle. "Father." "I am fine," Silas called. But one hand pressed against his side. They rode until the pasture disappeared behind the bluff. At Miller's Ford, Silas finally slid from his horse. Clara caught him before he struck the ground. Blood darkened his shirt beneath the coat, but the wound was along his ribs, not deep enough to take him quickly. Owen knelt beside him. "We need a doctor." Silas caught his wrist. "The letter." Clara looked at her father. "You wanted to keep it hidden. I wanted to keep you from carrying what it says. That choice is not yours anymore." Silas released Owen. Clara took the envelope from the strongbox papers Owen had slipped beneath his coat before throwing the box into the creek. She broke the seal. The first lines were written in Evelyn Bell's hand. "My dear Clara, if you are reading this, then your father has finally stopped protecting the lie." Clara's breath caught. She continued, "Silas is the man who raised you, and he has loved you from the first day he held you. But he is not the man whose blood runs in your veins." Her hands began to shake. Owen looked at Silas. The older man closed his eyes. Clara read the next line once in silence. Then again aloud. "Your father was Nathaniel Cross." Clara lowered the letter. The sound of the creek filled the silence. For most of her life, Silas Bell had been the fixed point in every room she entered. He had taught her to ride before she could reach the stirrups, corrected her posture at the dinner table, and waited outside her room through the worst nights after her mother died. Now he lay against a cottonwood root with blood on his shirt, and one page had turned him into a stranger. No, Clara said. Silas opened his eyes. She looked down at the letter again, as if the words might change under morning light. They are lying. No, Silas said quietly. Her face tightened. You knew? Yes. How long? Since the night Evelyn brought you home. Clara took one step away from him. Amos sat on a flat stone nearby, his wounded leg stretched out before him. He looked down at his hands, giving her what little privacy an open riverbank could offer. Owen remained close enough to catch Silas if he weakened, but far enough not to stand between father and daughter. Clara pressed the letter against her chest. My mother gave birth to me. She did. And Nathaniel Cross was my father. Yes. The word broke something inside her. She turned toward the water. Her shoulders rose and fell once, then again. Owen watched her fight to keep her pain hidden the way some people fought to keep a horse steady in a storm. She locked her knees, lifted her chin, and refused to let anyone see her fall. But grief did not ask permission. You let me believe I was yours, she said. Silas shifted and winced. You were mine. That is not what the letter says. The letter speaks of blood. And what do you speak of? He looked at her for a long time. The first night you came to Bell Crossing, you would not stop crying. Evelyn had ridden for hours with you wrapped beneath her coat. You were cold and hungry, and neither of us knew what to do. Clara's eyes glistened, but she did not turn around. Silas continued. I walked the kitchen floor until sunrise. Every time I sat down, you cried again, so I kept walking. His hand trembled against his side. By morning, my back hurt, my legs were numb, and you had wrapped your fingers around one of mine. That was the moment you became my daughter. Clara faced him. Then why hide Nathaniel from me? Because Gideon Tolliver was still alive. Because men were searching for Lily Cross. Because Nathaniel believed you had been taken west, and Evelyn feared that if he knew the truth, he would come for you and lead Gideon straight to our door. Clara stared at him. Lily Cross. Silas looked away. Owen understood before she asked. Clara's voice barely carried above the creek. I am Lily. Amos closed his eyes. Silas nodded. Evelyn changed your name. Clara looked down at the red ribbon still tied around Amos's fist. A memory seemed to pass through her face, not a clear one but the shape of something lost. A woman humming near a window, a rough wooden horse, a man lifting her toward the branch of a cottonwood tree. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Did Nathaniel know I lived? No, Silas said, not before he disappeared. What happened to him? Silas's expression grew heavy. That is the truth I never found. Amos lifted his head. I may know part of it. They turned toward him. He took a slow breath. Nathaniel met Gideon Tolliver 3 days after Evelyn took Lily. He planned to trade the silver claim and water rights for proof the child was alive. Silas frowned. You told me he left town. I told you what Gideon forced me to say. Amos reached inside his coat and removed a folded scrap of paper. It was stained from years of handling. Nathaniel gave me this before the meeting. Owen took it and opened it. The note contained only a location and a time. Old Mercy Mine, midnight. Silas's face darkened. That mine collapsed 20 years ago. Part of it did, Amos said. There is a second entrance through the western canyon. Clara wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. Did Nathaniel go there? Yes. And return? No. Silas tried to stand. Owen pressed one hand against his shoulder. You are not riding anywhere with that wound. Silas pushed his hand away. If Tolliver finds the records in the creek, he will know we have the letter. He will go to the mine. Why? Clara asked. Amos looked at her. Because Gideon hid his ledgers there. the ones that name every ranch he stole and every judge he paid. Owen glanced toward the distant ridge. Wade had inherited more than his father's name. If the old records survived, they could destroy everything he had built through fear and forged claims. Clara folded Evelyn's letter carefully and placed it inside her coat. She knelt in front of Silas. "I do not forgive you." His face tightened, but he nodded. "I know. I may not forgive you for a long time. I know that too." She took his hand. "But I will not leave you here." Silas looked at their joined hands, then at her face. For the first time, the powerful cattleman appeared unsure of what to say. Owen helped him onto Clara's horse. Amos mounted behind another saddle with difficulty. The nearest doctor lived in Red Bluff, but the road into town crossed open ground Wade's men could watch. Owen pointed toward the canyon. "There is an old mission cabin 2 miles west. We can leave Silas and Amos there, then reach the mine before Tolliver." Clara looked at him. "You expect me to stay behind?" "I expect you to choose." Her eyes held his. "My whole life was built on other people making choices for me." She mounted the spare horse. "That ends today." They reached the mission cabin near noon. Silas was pale but awake when Owen helped him inside. Amos found clean cloth and a bottle of spirits left in a cabinet. Clara stood in the doorway, looking west toward the dark line of the canyon. Owen came beside her. "You do not have to prove anything." "I am not going for proof." "Then why?" She touched the letter beneath her coat. "Because a man I never knew may have died believing his daughter was lost." A faint rumble rolled across the valley. Not thunder. Hoofbeats. Owen climbed the rise beside the cabin and looked back along the trail. 5 riders were coming fast. Wade Tolliver was no longer smiling. And tied across the saddle of the rider beside him was the iron strongbox from the creek. Wade Tolliver's riders spread across the trail below the mission cabin. The strongbox hung from one saddle, dripping creek water onto the dust. Owen counted 5 men, all armed. The cabin had 1 door, 2 small windows, and no rear exit except a narrow opening beneath the floor where animals had burrowed through the foundation. Silas lay on a cot inside, his coat folded beneath his head. Amos sat nearby with a strip of clean cloth tied around his injured leg. Clara stood at the window. "They will surround us." "They already have," Owen said. Silas tried to rise. Payne stopped him halfway. "Wade wants the letter and the papers," he said. "Give him neither." Clara looked at him. "You can barely stand." "I can still aim." Owen crossed the room and closed the wooden shutters. "No one fires unless they enter." Silas gave him a hard look. "You think Wade came to talk?" "I think he came expecting fear. That gives us one advantage." "What advantage?" "He believes desperate people make poor choices." Outside, Wade called from the trail. "Mercer, send Miss Bell out. The rest of you may walk away." Clara's face became cold. "He thinks I am still worth something to him." Silas reached for his revolver. "You are worth everything." The words came too quickly to be planned. Clara looked at him but said nothing. Wade called again. "I know you can hear me. The box belongs to Bell Crossing." Owen moved to the door. "No," he answered. "It belongs to the man who buried it." "And where is he?" "That is what we intend to find out." Silence followed. Then Wade laughed. "You are chasing a dead man through an empty mine." Amos leaned forward. "How does he know about the mine?" Silas looked toward the strongbox outside. "The ledger. They opened it." Or Gideon left Wade his own copy. Wade dismounted and walked a few steps toward the cabin. He carried no rifle, only a revolver at his side. "Clara," he called, "your father lied to you your entire life, Mercer has known you 2 days. Amos abandoned you as a child. Which of them deserves your trust? Clara stepped toward the door. Owen caught her arm gently. That is what he wants. She looked at his hand, then at his face. I know. She raised her voice. And you, Wade, what have you ever done to earn it? His answer came without hesitation. I kept your father's ranch alive. Silas's mouth tightened. Wade continued. I settled debts he was too proud to collect. I convinced weak ranchers to sell before they failed. I protected the Bell name while he sat in his study mourning a woman who deceived him. Silas swung his legs from the cot. Clara stepped in front of him. No. He will not speak of Evelyn that way. He wants you angry. Silas stared at her. A few hours earlier, she had told him she could not forgive him. Now she stood between him and danger. He slowly lowered the gun. Owen noticed movement through a crack in the shutter. One of Wade's men had left the group. He was circling behind the cabin. Owen pointed toward the floor. There is an opening beneath the rear wall. Amos nodded, too small for a man. Not too small for smoke. Silas understood. They will burn us out. Clara looked around the cabin. Dry walls, old roof, dusty blankets, one bucket of water. A faint smell of kerosene entered through the boards. Owen pulled the mattress from the cot and dragged it toward the rear wall. Wet every cloth you can find. With what? Clara asked. Amos lifted an old water jug from beside the stove. Not enough to stop a fire. Enough to buy time. Outside, glass shattered. A bottle struck the rear wall, and flames climbed along the boards. Smoke entered the cabin almost at once. Owen pressed the damp mattress over the opening. Clara soaked blankets and packed them along the floor. Silas struggled to remain upright. We cannot stay here. Owen looked toward the front window. Beyond the riders lay the canyon trail. If they could reach it, the narrow rocks would prevent Wade's men from surrounding them again. But the open ground between the cabin and the trail offered no cover. Amos coughed. There used to be a mission bell. Clara looked at him. What? On the roof, rope ran through the rafters. Owen saw the frayed rope hanging near the stove. A bell will not help. It might, Amos said. The Miller family grazes sheep west of here. They hear that bell, they come looking. Silas shook his head, too far. Sound carries through the canyon. Clara grabbed the rope and pulled. Nothing happened. She pulled again. Above them, metal groaned. Then the old mission bell rang. The sound rolled across the valley, deep and uneven. Outside, Wade shouted for his men to move. Clara kept pulling. Each ring seemed to shake dust from the rafters. If you believe courage sometimes means asking strangers to hear you, stay with this story, because help was coming from a place none of them expected. The rear wall began to burn through. Owen kicked open the front door and fired once into the air. Wade's men dropped behind their horses. Now, Clara helped Amos through the doorway. Owen supported Silas on the other side. They ran toward the canyon while smoke covered the yard. Wade fired, but the shots struck dirt behind them. One rider moved to block the trail. Before he reached it, a rope snapped tight across his path. His horse stopped sharply, throwing him into the dust without serious injury. From behind the rocks emerged 3 women carrying old hunting rifles. At their center stood Ruth Miller, a gray-haired widow known across Red Bluff for raising 6 sons and trusting none of them to do a job she could do herself. Behind her came 2 wagons filled with shepherds, ranch wives, and farmhands. The mission bell had not called one family. It had called half the Western Valley. Wade's men looked around and saw too many witnesses. For the first time, doubt entered their faces. Ruth Miller aimed her rifle toward the ground near Wade's boots. "I heard a bell," she said. "Then I saw smoke." Wade forced a smile. "A private matter, Mrs. Miller. Fire stops being private when the wind blows toward my land." More riders appeared on the ridge. Not Wade's men. Bell Ranch hands. At their front rode Silas's longtime cattle boss, Henry Boone. He looked at Silas, then at Wade. "We found the contracts in your bunkhouse," Henry said. "Every false debt, every stolen deed." Wade's smile disappeared. He turned his horse toward the canyon. Clara stepped into his path. "Where is Nathaniel Cross?" Wade looked down at her. For a moment, hatred stripped away his calm. Then he glanced at the sealed entrance of the old Mercy mine in the distance. "He lasted longer than my father expected." Clara's breath stopped. Wade spurred his horse past her and raced toward the mine. Owen mounted the nearest riderless horse. He looked at Clara. Neither needed to speak. They followed Wade into the canyon, where the man she had called father might still be waiting beneath 20 years of darkness. The canyon narrowed until the morning sky became a thin strip of blue above the rocks. Wade rode ahead without looking back. Owen and Clara followed at a hard pace, their horses slipping on loose stone. Dust rose around them and clung to Clara's torn coat. Her face was pale, but her eyes never left the rider in front. The entrance to Old Mercy Mine appeared at the end of the canyon. Weathered boards covered most of the opening. One had been torn away recently. Wade jumped from his horse and disappeared inside. Owen reached the entrance seconds later. He dismounted and caught Clara's reins. "You stay behind me." She pulled the reins from his hand. "You heard what he said." "I did." "Then do not ask me to wait outside." Owen looked at her for one breath, then nodded. They entered together. The mine smelled of wet stone, rust, and wood that had been decaying for years. Thin tracks ran beneath their boots. Somewhere deeper inside, water dripped in a slow, hollow rhythm. Owen lit a small lamp hanging near the entrance. Its flame showed fresh footprints in the dust. Wade's. Beside them were older marks. Not 20 years old. Recent. Clara knelt. "Someone has been coming here." Owen touched the wall. A lantern hook held a clean piece of cloth, and an empty food tin sat in the corner. He knew this place was not empty. They moved deeper. The main passage split into two tunnels. One sloped downward, the other curved toward a faint current of air. Clara pointed toward the lower tunnel. "The tracks go that way." Before Owen could answer, Wade's voice echoed from the dark. "You should have stayed with your father." Clara stepped forward. "Where is Nathaniel?" A lamp flared at the far end of the passage. Wade stood beside an old timber support. In one hand he held a revolver. In the other was a small book wrapped in leather. "My father kept careful records," he said. "He believed every secret had value." Owen moved slightly in front of Clara. Wade noticed. "You have known her less than a week, Mercer. That has been long enough to know she deserves the truth." Wade laughed softly. "Truth is a poor thing to build a life on. People say they want it until it takes something from them." Clara's voice remained steady. "Did your father kill Nathaniel Cross?" Wade looked at her. "No." Hope flashed across her face. Then he added, "He left him here." The hope vanished. Wade lifted the leather book. Nathaniel came to trade his silver claim for the child's safety. Gideon told him Lily was alive and far away. Nathaniel wanted proof. "What proof?" Clara asked. "A piece of red ribbon, your ribbon." Her hand moved toward her coat. Wade continued. "My father convinced him that Evelyn Bell had betrayed him. Then he locked him behind the lower gate." Owen looked toward the darkness beyond Wade. "Why keep him alive?" "Because Nathaniel knew where the silver vein began. Clara's breath trembled. For how long? Wade's expression became distant. My father brought food for several years. After Gideon died, I continued. Why? Owen asked. Because a dead man cannot answer questions. Clara took another step. Is he alive now? For the first time, Wade did not answer. A faint sound came from below. 3 slow knocks. Clara froze. Then came 2 more. Not stone falling. A signal. She moved toward the lower passage. Wade raised the revolver. Owen drew faster. Neither fired. The 2 men stood with their weapons aimed, the mine holding every breath between them. Drop it, Owen said. Wade's eyes shifted toward the timber support beside him. Owen understood too late. Wade fired into the beam. The shot split the old wood. A deep crack rolled through the mine. Dust poured from the ceiling. Run, Owen shouted. Wade turned toward the side tunnel as the support gave way. Rocks fell between them, filling the passage with noise and darkness. Owen grabbed Clara and pulled her back. A stone struck his shoulder, driving him to one knee. Clara caught the lamp before it fell. When the collapse stopped, a wall of rock blocked the way to Wade. The lower tunnel remained open. From somewhere beneath them came the knocking again. Clara lifted the lamp. Nathaniel. No answer. She started down the slope. Owen followed, one arm hanging stiff from the blow. The tunnel ended at an iron gate set into the rock. Its lock had rusted almost solid. Beyond it sat a thin man beneath a wool blanket. His hair was white, his beard covered most of his face. One ankle was chained to a ring in the floor. Clara stopped at the bars. The man slowly raised his head. His eyes were faded with age, but clear. He looked at Clara's face, then at the edge of the red ribbon showing from her pocket. His lips parted. Lily. Clara gripped the bars with both hands. She had imagined this moment during the ride through the canyon. She had expected anger, questions, perhaps nothing at all. Instead, her voice broke on one word. Father. Nathaniel tried to stand and fell back against the wall. Owen struck the lock with a loose iron bar until it broke. Clara rushed inside and knelt before the old man. He lifted one trembling hand and touched her cheek, as if afraid she might disappear. You lived, he whispered. Clara covered his hand with hers. So did you. A sound came from the blocked passage behind them. Stone shifted. Wade was digging through. Owen searched the chamber and found another tunnel behind Nathaniel's cot. Where does that lead? Nathaniel looked toward it. To the western shaft. Can you walk? Not far. Owen lifted him carefully. Clara took the lamp and led the way into the narrow passage. Behind them, Wade's voice broke through the rocks. You cannot take him out of here. They reached the western shaft as daylight appeared ahead. Owen helped Nathaniel through the opening. Clara climbed out after him. Then she stopped. Below the ridge, dozens of riders filled the canyon. Henry Boone, Ruth Miller, Bell Ranch hands, farmers, and the county marshal had arrived. Silas sat upright in a wagon despite the bandage around his ribs. He saw Nathaniel. Nathaniel saw him. 20 years of silence passed between the 2 men in a single look. Then Wade emerged from the mine behind Owen, with his revolver raised. The marshal lifted his rifle. Put it down, Tolliver. Wade looked at the witnesses below. At the men who had once feared him. At Clara standing beside the father he had helped keep buried. His hand began to shake. Then Nathaniel spoke. Your father told you fear was power. Wade stared at him. Nathaniel's voice was weak, but it carried through the canyon. He was wrong. fear only lasts until one person stops bowing. One by one, the Bell Ranch hands stepped forward. Wade lowered the gun. The marshal climbed the slope and took it from him. As Wade was led away, Clara looked toward Silas in the wagon. One father had raised her with love and hidden the truth. The other had survived 20 years because he believed she might still be alive. Soon she would have to decide how both men could fit inside the life waiting for her. But before she could take a step toward either of them, Nathaniel gripped Owen's sleeve. "The silver was never the reason Gideon wanted this land," he whispered. Owen looked at him. Nathaniel pointed toward Cottonwood Hollow. "Beneath your burned house is something worth more than the mine." And from the fear in Silas Bell's face, Clara knew he already understood what Nathaniel meant. By late afternoon, the riders returned to Cottonwood Hollow. Smoke still rose from the blackened ranch house. One wall had fallen inward, and the porch where Owen had stood the day before was now a bed of ash and broken boards. Nathaniel Cross sat in Ruth Miller's wagon beneath a clean blanket. Clara rode beside him, glancing over every few moments as if she feared he might vanish when she looked away. Silas Bell followed in a second wagon. Neither man had spoken since leaving the canyon. The county marshal had taken Wade Tolliver and two of his closest men toward Red Bluff. The remaining Bell hands came willingly, not as soldiers protecting an employer, but as neighbors carrying shovels, ropes, and buckets. Owen stopped where the kitchen had once stood. "Beneath the house," he said, "what are we looking for?" Nathaniel pointed toward the stone fireplace, the only part still standing. "Evelyn hid a second deed there." Silas lowered his eyes. Clara noticed. "You knew about it." "I knew she brought papers home that night," he said. "I never knew where she placed them." Nathaniel looked at him from beneath the blanket. "She did not trust any of us completely by then." Silas accepted the words without argument. The men cleared burned timber from the foundation. Owen worked beside them despite the pain in his shoulder. Clara carried smaller pieces away, her fine green coat now torn, blackened, and covered in dust. No one told her to stop. Near sunset, Owen found a flat stone beneath the remains of the hearth. It was different from the others, smoother and set without mortar. He lifted it. Below lay a narrow iron tube sealed with wax. Clara knelt beside him. Owen opened the tube and removed 3 rolled documents, all protected by oilcloth. The first was the original deed to Cottonwood Hollow. The second was a legal transfer written in Evelyn Bell's hand and witnessed by a circuit judge who had died years earlier. The third was a letter. Owen read the transfer twice before looking at Clara. This land was placed in trust for Lily Cross. Clara stared at him. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Silas looked toward the lower pasture, as though he had always known the land carried a rightful owner and had spent 20 years refusing to name her. Clara took the document. "If I am Lily, then Cottonwood Hollow belongs to me." "Yes," the marshal's deputy said. "By law it appears so." The gathered neighbors began whispering. Owen stood very still. For one day the ranch had been his. He had paid every dollar he possessed for it. He had risked his life defending its secrets, and before he had repaired a single fence, the truth had taken it from him. Clara looked up. "Owen." He forced a small smile. "It is your land. I did not ask for it. Neither did I until I saw it." The words carried no bitterness, which made them harder for her to hear. She looked at the burned foundation, the ruined roof beams, and the fields beyond them. "You believed in this place when everyone else called it worthless. That does not change the deed." "No," she said, "but it changes what is right." Silas shifted in the wagon. "Clara, do not make a decision from guilt." She turned toward him. "For once, I am not asking anyone to decide for me." She walked to Nathaniel and placed the papers in his hands. "You suffered for this land." Nathaniel looked at the deed, then at his daughter. I suffered because I believed land and silver could protect a child. His voice was weak but clear. They could not. He handed the documents back. You are the only thing I wanted returned. Clara's eyes filled. She knelt beside him, and Nathaniel placed one thin arm around her shoulders. Silas watched from several yards away. Pain moved across his face, but he did not turn from it. After a moment, Clara rose and walked to him. You raised me. Silas swallowed. Yes. You lied to me. Yes. You loved me. His voice broke. Every day. Clara took his hand. I cannot promise the hurt will disappear. I would not believe you if you did. But I will not erase the father who carried me through the night, because I found the father who waited for me in darkness. Silas bowed his head over her hand. Nathaniel watched them, and something in his expression softened. He had lost 20 years, but he did not ask Clara to repay them by losing the man who had cared for her. Owen stood apart near the ruined porch. Clara approached him with the deed. I want you to keep Cottonwood Hollow. He shook his head. It is not mine to take. Then do not take it. She placed the deed against his chest. Build it with me. Owen looked at her. Around them, hammers had already begun striking. Ruth Miller was directing men toward the barn. Henry Boone organized teams to repair the northern fence. Someone had started a cooking fire near the creek. The valley was rebuilding the ranch before either of them had asked. I have $11, Owen said. Clara smiled through her tears. I have a burned house. That is not much of a beginning. My life began once before with a red ribbon and a lie. I would rather begin again with the truth. Owen covered her hand with his. This time he did not let pride answer first. All right. They rebuilt Cottonwood Hollow before winter. Owen refused free cattle from Silas, but accepted a fair loan and repaid every dollar over the next 4 years. Nathaniel lived in a small cabin near the creek, where he slowly regained his strength and learned the grown woman his daughter had become. Silas came often. At first, he stayed only long enough to discuss fences or water. Later, he remained for supper. The first time Nathaniel passed him the coffee pot without silence turning bitter, Clara looked away so neither man would see her cry. Wade Tolliver's records returned stolen property to 7 families. His power ended not with revenge, but with witnesses, honest papers, and men who finally refused to fear him. Owen and Clara married the following spring beneath the split cottonwood. She wore the faded red ribbon around her wrist. If this journey has stayed with you, remember that truth does not always restore the years we lose, but it can still give us a better way to use the years ahead. Share this story with someone who believes broken lives can be rebuilt. Years later, the ranch house stood strong again. On quiet evenings, Clara would find Owen at the porch rail, watching the cottonwoods move beside the creek. Nathaniel's lamp glowed from his cabin. Silas's horse waited near the gate. Cattle grazed behind fences set deep and straight. The ranch, once feared, abandoned, and burned, had become a place where 2 fathers sat at the same table, where a daughter no longer lived beneath another person's silence, and where a man who owned almost nothing learned that accepting love did not make him less strong. Above the fireplace, Clara kept the old brass key and the red ribbon in a simple wooden frame. Not as reminders of the secret, as proof that even after 20 years of darkness, someone had finally opened the door.